Hello, I'm Peter Ayers, and you're listening to Stages, the podcast that converses
World
with
War
creatives
II gave
about
us
craft,
Lady for Godot and
career.
Oklahoma.
Without the arts, we are diminished.
We had the kind of creative freedom.
I was on television as a child, and then I was in Cotty's Happy Hour.
She leaned across to me and she said, one day, you'll be doing that.
Mind-boggling. They were even lined with purple leather.
I went to the ABC and auditioned.
I was so fit at the end of that, you could have entered me in the Melbourne Cup.
I still firmly believe that great work can be made in small places.
If nobody's going to respect your talent, you've got to respect it.
I hope I've been entertaining, that's all.
Well, that's very kind of you, Peter. But you are a friend.
And as are you.
Yeah, it's a date.
It's a day.
Hello, I'm Peter Ayers, and welcome to episode 190 of the Stages podcast. A theatre foyer would not be complete without the presence of Michelle Guthrie. She has worked in the entertainment industry for over 30 years and has been present at a vast array of entertainments as a performer, publicist or producer. Since her youth, she has been an avid participant in any experience involving the business called show. She was always destined to contribute to the making of theatre. She has promoted product and performers such as Cats, the Phantom of the Opera, Barry Humphries and the Dalai Lama. She's played rock and roll stages in bands and a tour of the Rocky Horror Show. And Michelle has produced 21 musicals since introducing neglected musicals to Sydney audiences, and managed the occasional triumph taking Calamity Jane on a national tour. It is a wealth of opportunity that has garnered tremendous experience and placed Michelle at the top of her game. This year she oversees 2 more additions to the neglected musicals repertoire and graces many more foyers. Stages was delighted to learn more and to be engaged by the effervescent and highly informed Michelle Guthrie.
It's going now, so whenever we start, we'll start.
Okay. Well, don't you ask me a question or something?
Yeah. You've never been stuck for a word, Michelle Guthrie.
No, never.
Welcome to Stages.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's nice. You're an avid listener, I believe.
Yep, absolutely.
Kept you company during the COVID lockdown?
Oh, yeah, on my daily walks.
Walking is a daily routine for you?
Oh, gosh, I wish. Yeah, when I can. Sometimes there's too much to do, but I really, it was every day during COVID for hours, but yeah, I'd like to do it a lot more.
A lot of your work is at nights.
Less so now. It definitely was before. A lot of it now is during the day, which is great when you've got a kid. So, yeah, I try to only be at something 2 nights a week. Often it's 3, though.
But in past years, it's...
Oh, every night, yeah.
In your lives as publicist and performer, now producer, all of those P words.
All those P words, I've thought of it before. I'm sure we could add to that.
Like?
I don't know.
Perfectionist?
Oh, no, I'm not that. I think I can be, but no, I don't know.
Let's talk about a show that you recently produced, Well-Behaved Women.
Yes.
I don't think there has ever been such a time of perfect synchronicity in Australia than to see a show with this perfectly constructed show by Carmel Dean and the women's movement, the Me Too movement, and the debates about consent and all sorts of things.
That was her inspiration, the Me Too movement, and it's what she's created is really quite remarkable. And what we did with it here was turn it into a theatrical show.
Because she'd written it as a song cycle, hadn't she?
Yeah, and it still is a song cycle. But in New York, it was presented at Joe's Pub, where you showcase and present things. And she spoke about the songs in between from the piano. And what we wanted to do with it here was to make it more theatrical, turn it into a show, not have 9 women singing 16 songs, but 4 women on stage playing all the different roles, so to speak, and make it an experience with the band on stage. And I think that's what we did.
But it was an entirely female company too, which I found really exciting. In the band, in the crew.
Yes.
That was obviously deliberate.
Absolutely. And a little bit trickier than I thought, because we did end up having one man.
Oh, where was the man?
Sound design.
Right.
Yeah, all the female sound designers were very much snapped up. But look, David did a great job, and he was fine in with all of us. It was absolutely joyous to work on that show. All the women together all the time. It was really a wonderful, wonderful couple of weeks, because we only had a week's rehearsal. We only did a week's worth of shows, and it was just amazing.
Who were the women who inspire you, Michelle?
Oh gosh.
I've put you on the spot a bit.
I don't want to sound naff.
That was coming.
No,
you won't sound naff.
Oh no, I will. I can only think of the people that...
So you're editing yourself.
I am editing myself.
This is your job. This is your role as a publicist coming through, I think.
Oh yeah, no, that does do that, which is awful. I can think of lots of women that have done things where I've gone, oh my God, I will never do that. I'll never act like that. So that's the opposite of being inspired. I'll do the soundbite. I am surrounded by women who inspire me every day, in every single part of my life, from the women that stand next to me at the school drop-off gate to the women that I participate in my many committees with, and the girlfriends that I've had for decades and decades that have gone through what they have gone and have listened to me and all of my stuff. I have surrounded myself with many, many women that inspire me.
Have you thought of going into politics?
God, no.
That's the other P.
Politics. Well, it's funny, we're moving into a new council area soon. I was complaining about something, and my husband said, you could always, go for council. And I'm like, never in a million years.
Doesn't appeal?
No. Well, I've dealt with a lot of councils with different jobs over the years, and I just think it's too tricky. It's really tricky. And really, really crazy long hours. I don't know how they do it.
How long have you been in show business now?
I don't know if I've ever not been in show business. I think my first paid job would have been 15 or 16, I think.
And what were you doing?
I guess my first unpaid job was dancing at the Opera House. At 16, I was doing club shows. I did the club show circuit. Would have been highly illegal. I was also dancing in a cage at a club, and I remember that was $10 a night. And this is going to make me sound like 112, but yeah, I was working in a shop during the day and working the clubs at night by 16. Yeah. Oh, and doing lots of amateur theatre when I could too.
Okay.
Yeah.
What sort of shows were you doing in the amateur scene?
Oh, gosh.
Merrily Roll Along?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you knew about that one.
Yeah. Was that the premiere production in Australia?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And it was the original version of the show. What gets done now is very different to what we did.
Yeah. It's gone through various incarnations.
And that was directed by...
John Milson.
You can tell me, yeah, great John Milson. And...
You gave us your Mary Magdalene in Superstar.
Oh, yes, that was at Glen Street Theatre. Yes, and Angela Bishop was in that.
Oh, was she? Showbiz reporter.
Yes. I'd met Angela before that, though, because that's right, we danced on films together. That was around 16, 17 as well. The other thing that took up my days was dancing on films back in the old 10BA days. And Angela was there next to me for nearly all of them.
Who was filming you? What were the films?
We were both in a film called The Boy Who Had Everything with Diane Salento and her son Jason in the lead.
All right, so these are feature films and you're dancing extras.
Yeah. Actually, Angela was a stand-in for Diane Salento. Right. I think back in those days you weren't cast as a stand-in. It was, hey, you, come and stand over here, put this hat on. But I remember her doing that and thinking, oh, wow, Angela's getting to be a stand-in.
No allowance or anything, just
gosh, no.
Put the hat on. So McCallum Musical Society on the North Shore. Mm-hmm. What is it about community theatre which sort of gives somebody some nice grounding to launch a career?
Well, there wasn't anywhere else to go back then as well. There wasn't anywhere to go and study other than NIDA and the ensemble. But my parents did amateur shows, so that's what introduced me to musicals, apart from what was on telly on a Saturday afternoon. So, you know, family. My family life at home was not great, and I craved family and like-minded people, and I started doing amateur shows at 15 and would get people to pick me up and drop me off until I got a car, and I would do one musical society rehearsals on Mondays and Wednesday nights and another one on Tuesdays and Thursday nights. And
you can do that when you're young, can't you?
Yes.
With rehearsals starting at 8 p.m. and finishing at 11 and then
yes,
and
working during the day and working in a restaurant at night on the weekends or doing the club shows. You know, it was just constant. But I loved it. And I loved hearing everybody's stories, you know, when there'd always be a tea break. And you'd get a cup of tea and have an Arnott's biscuit, and somebody'd always have something to say about that show they did way back when. And also, too, amateur theatre in those days was littered with people that had actually worked, people that had been in J.C. Williamson's in the chorus, and now they were doing a lead or directing. So I loved all of that.
Do you have a collection of cast recordings at home?
I did.
Yeah.
I don't anymore, no. I don't even have a record player anymore.
So what were you listening to as a kid? What would you put on the My Fair Lady or...
Yes,
Sweet
my parents
Charity?
had a few, but really it was the movies that were on telly. Sweet Charity was on about every 6 months.
I suppose, yes, television's changed completely too.
Yeah.
But every Sunday afternoon you look forward to the matinee movie, which would generally be an MGM musical.
But often they'd be 3 in a row, and you'd just sit there and watch them all. Yeah, that was mainly where I found out about musicals. I think we had Oklahoma, because my parents did Oklahoma, but I don't think we had much else. I think it was just really watching the movies on telly.
Was there ever a fascination with plays, or just always musicals?
Predominantly musicals. You know, I went to dancing school. I thought if I could spend my life singing and dancing, that would be great. But like a lot of people that end up, you know, that are in this business, they start with that and then find the other things they do within the business. But yeah, I mean, I never really aspired to be that kind of actress. I just wanted to be in shows. Never auditioned for a play. Just wanted to be in musicals.
Oh, musicals. If you weren't working in the theatre, what do you think you might be doing?
That's just kind of impossible.
Yet to think about.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I have obviously had other jobs over the years, because you need to take whatever job you can get when you're younger just to work. But no, I really can't. I mean, I worked in different sales jobs, and I worked in charities for the Cancer Council, running events and things like that for years and years. But that only made me realise even more that that's not where I belonged. I belonged in this business we call show. And so I called my way back to it. I really wasn't gone for very long, but at the time it felt like an eternity.
So after secondary school, do you go off to university, or that you're studying jobs where you can get them?
No, I was working in a shop during the day,
Right.
doing amateur musical society stuff at night, and singing and dancing in clubs. I used to do the Tony Priest musicals as well. Do you know about those?
No.
Oh, I can't believe that somebody hasn't come on your show to talk about the Tony Priest musicals. So
This is a first.
They were in the clubs, and I think they were abridged. I'm not really sure, but you know, a lot of people, like Donna Lee, would have been in them. And you know, I get a phone call from Tony, and he said, "Oh, so you've got you were in Carousel or something?" And I said, "Yeah." So have you still got that outfit? Yeah. Okay. Do you think you could come down to St George Lee's Club this afternoon, and the girls will show you what to do? We're doing Oklahoma. Do you know Oklahoma? Yeah, I do. No, I know Oklahoma. Okay, all right. Well, if you could be here at 1. And I got there with my frocks, and then somebody did my makeup and somebody did my hair, and I think it was 17. And then Shirley Detmar, who's now Shirley McGrath, who works for Frosty, was like, okay, this is when I look at you, you say who you take into the box social lorry, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to kick here, and we're going to dip there, and on Oklahoma we're going to sing this. I'm like, okay, yes, Shirley. You just go on and do the show with no rehearsal, just this little bit in the wings.
Just a one-off performance, or they had a season?
I think, I only ever did a few, but they stayed with me. I think that they would just do one, like on a Sunday afternoon. There must have been some on a Saturday night. It's a long time ago. It's hard to remember. But Tony Priest had a massive musical circuit that went round the clubs. Somebody's going to ring you now and tell you all the rest of it that I don't know. Fill in the gaps.
Well, they can ring away. I can't take the call exactly at the moment. Perhaps I'll just have these spasmodic calls over the next couple of months. But you establish yourself as a performer, don't you? You did the Rocky Horror Show.
Mm-hmm. I did Rocky Horror for like 3 years, I think, in the end. A couple of different tours of it.
And Reg was... had he returned to play Frankenfurter?
No, so this was after Reg had stopped. We had Daniel Abaneri.
Oh, okay.
And then on the last tour it was Simon Westaway, who'd been Brad, was now Frankenfurter. And that was about the time that Wilton Morley fell over, his company. And he ran screaming from the building, which was the Country at the time. Blood Brothers had just closed. We were in New Zealand touring, and it all just fell over. So he would have given up the rights at that point. But before that, he was just every year trotting the show out to make money.
It was a bit of a cash cow, wasn't it, Rocky Horror? You
licensed to print money. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know the fate of that show now. If it ever did come back, which I can't imagine that it wouldn't, I'd like to see it go back to those original roots of a rock and roll show with handheld mics with cords and that real grungy rock and roll show that it was originally created to be.
Yes, it lost a lot of its charm in productions in recent years, didn't it? It just became too clean or pristine. And
it became musical theatre, and it definitely wasn't that when I did it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the productions I did weren't as great as the productions that came before it, but it was the last of that kind of presentation of that show.
Well, we hear of those original productions in London or Australia with Harry M, and in a grungy old dirty flea-bitten cinema. I mean, it must have been wonderful.
Yeah, well, it felt like that when I was doing it. But, the Valhalla is where they did it in Sydney. I'm not sure where it was in Melbourne, and it was upstairs at the Royal Court in London. And that's when a lot of those things became, were born, really, because they were allowed to get away with that stuff. They could be in a venue where the fire exits couldn't open and things like that. So they could actually take their time to create the show.
A time before WH&S.
Yeah. Yeah, so I did Rocky Horror. I was doing theatre restaurants. I was spraying people with perfume in David Jones. And then I did Dames at Sea, Ruby in Dames at Sea at the Opera House for Peter Williams. And that was the last big thing I did, because he came into the dressing room at interval in the last week of the show and said, I want you to stop all of this. And I really did not know what he was talking about. And he said, come and talk to me in the office next week. So I did. I presumed he wanted me to be in another show. But apparently all through rehearsals I'd been telling him how to sell the show. And he said, that's what you should do. That's what you should be doing for me, and come and do that. And I thought, well, this isn't going to happen again. No one's going to pluck me off the stage and put me in the position of helping to create shows and work on it that way. So I took it.
Were you content being a performer?
Yeah.
Was it easy to give that away?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it's the best thing I ever did, but it was a difficult decision at the time, because I felt that I had more to do. I think all performers think that, I haven't done my Miss Julie kind of thing. But I knew I wouldn't have an opportunity like this again. It would be ridiculous to say no to him, and what his plans were. So I said yes, and it's the best thing I ever did.
The universe coming calling, and
well, yeah,
happy accidents and right place, right time.
Absolutely, and I think being able to know what those moments are when they come along, I think that's that's a gift. I think a lot of people, when they're offered things, they don't realise what they're being offered. They don't see that, yes, this is actually the golden ticket. You think you're chasing a golden ticket, but this is actually the golden ticket. And you watch people knock things back and turn things down to chase things that aren't really ever going to happen for them. And I look back to moments like that in my life and go, no, I knew to take it. It wasn't easy, but it really wasn't that difficult. I knew it was a great opportunity, and so I took it.
But you're obviously exhibiting particular talents which he recognises. Where do you think that's come from, that sort of inherent knowledge of how to sell a show?
Well, I don't know. You can ask me lots of things I'm going to say I don't know to.
I'm just forcing you to reflect, Michelle. You've just taken it as a given in past years.
Oh, well, I have. I just, a friend of mine described me as a shark because I just keep moving forward. So I COVID, I got to reflect a bit then. I guess we all did. But it is very instinctive to me how to sell a show. And what audiences might want, of course, everybody can get that wrong. And if everybody knew exactly how to do that, then we'd all be rich. But it's still selling. But being a publicist is selling. And I had a pretty huge sales background, lots of telemarketing, lots of, standing in the middle of a shopping centre and having to go up to people and talk them into, whatever the hell I was selling that week. There was lots and lots of that kind of sales work in my 20s. And
yes, and you look at your teenage years in amateur theatre. You're working in community groups, you're working in clubs at a very young age, you're observing what audiences respond to, you're in clubs, so you're garnering all sorts of knowledge which you're going to use later on.
Well, and also, when little old ladies or just people that if they weren't drunk and they'd come up and talk to me about stuff, I would listen to them. I think, speaking of drunk people, I spent years in cover bands as well in my 20s, and you'd always talk to people and they'd say, I love that song. And I go, okay, well, why do you love that song? That song that we actually do twice a night because people love it. And they, would talk to you about why they loved it and why they were there and what was so good about being in that space on a Friday night and how they come every week and all that kind of stuff. Back when I could, stand around and listen to those people in those crowded rooms.
Well, can we talk about that, listening to people in those crowded rooms? Because you have a hearing impairment. Is that right? Is that correct terminology?
Well, that's the terminology I prefer to use. I'm hearing impaired.
Yeah. So is that in recent years, or have you always had that?
Well, I think if you speak to anybody that's worked with me over the last 20 or 30 years, they'll say I've always had it. But I've worn hearing aids for 16 years. I don't have them in all the time. My lip reading skills are pretty good.
That must be handy in foyers.
It can be. It's really handy when you watch awards programs and they flick to the audience and you go, oh no. But no, it is handy. But yeah, no, hearing impairment, it can be tricky in a foyer, but you adapt and watch people, and I tell people, I say, I'm sorry, I really can't hear you. And then, in certain environments, the hearing aids are useless. So, they go, I can't hear you, you'll have to call me tomorrow.
You were telling me something off mic about, you used to describe yourself as hard of hearing. And people would react very differently. Yes,
quite awfully, actually. Something about that made people want to make fun and make all the obvious jokes and kind of ridicule you. And it was really out of their own embarrassment and insecurity and a lack of understanding. But I found the minute I switched to saying I'm hearing impaired, which I am, people's attitude, they just go, oh, okay. And then they would change the way they were to try. Obviously people get louder, which doesn't help when you're hearing impaired. But, just the attitude changed. And so I thought, well, no, this is, because it wasn't nice when, somebody would decide in front of people to try and make fun of you, because it's not something to make fun of. It just is. Yeah. And I think we all have to get used to it, because I think many, many more of us are going to be hearing impaired over the next 10 years.
Well, there's much more visibility now, isn't there? Yeah, people are more aware of it. And people working in the industry.
Yes, well, I mean, there was no, earplugs and things like that when you performed back in the day. There was no sense of damage that you could have been doing to your ears.
So do you think that you might have incurred some of that damage working in bands? And in
I think it's all of the above, because obviously I've spent time looking into it, and I've gone to different doctors and things. But there is a line of it in my family, so there'd be some hereditary stuff there. Also some nerve damage from some medication as a kid. Even working in Rocky Horror, the flash pots used to go off right next to our heads, and I've got a picture of me backstage with my fingers in my ears. So we used to do that to try and keep away from that. And then they're singing in bands. I've also read that living on busy roads can also have issues. So I think all of the above, really.
So General Manager of Peter and Alan Williams Presents for close to a decade.
No, I didn't work for Peter and Alan for 10 years. I'm not really sure how long it was. I think probably 18 months, a year, something like that.
But it's a nice apprenticeship to
it was great.
Start your career.
It was fantastic.
So were you doing shows like Arsenic and Old Lace, Swell Party?
That was all before me.
Right.
I was there towards the end, so Oscar's turn to sing.
You were put on stage one night, weren't you?
Was. Another one of those situations where I'm just sitting at my desk doing my work, and Peter Williams, predominantly lived in Queensland, would only come down when he needed to. And he rang me and said, "Are we having a good day? And have you, did you sort those ladies out with that group booking for Wednesday?" And yes, all that stuff. And he said, "Have you still got those frocks from when you were singing on the showboat?" And I go, "Yeah." Like I'd ever get rid of a frock. He said, "Well, could you go home and grab them and meet Lindsay Partridge backstage at 3:00 and learn all of Natalie Moscow's songs and a few of Jackie Reese's songs and go on?" Sure. Okay.
Did you ask why?
Well, I just presumed they were off. I knew there were no covers. So I was just driving home, trying to go through the lyrics in my head to "You Light Up My Life," and the last time I saw Paris, I think, gosh, I can't even remember now, but there was 3 or 4 songs I had to kind of learn and go on for in my frocks from the showboat.
That show is spoken about a lot. It's one of those famous, infamous shows that had a stellar cast, but perhaps wasn't the best artistic success.
Well, I mean, of course, I have a very different viewpoint from it feels like 150 women that say that they were in that show. So there were 2 seasons of this show, and it was so successful he brought it back, and there was a lot of different actresses in the second one, and none of them were happy. The first cast, the second cast, none of them were happy. It was one of the most unhappy companies and they really weren't happy when I went on, because they wanted understudies. They wanted to be able to go off, and that wasn't the parameters under which Peter Williams could work. They were unbelievably unhappy, and it all fell over quite spectacularly. And the whole company closed down during the last run of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it was a really good show.
The premise was
all those songs
being nominated for, that
had won. And there was also a song that Liza had sung at the Oscars that was added to it as an opening number, I think, which was It's Oscar's turn to sing. Maybe it was the closing, can't remember. But it was a really good show. It was what it was. Was it as good as it could have been? Probably not. But the audiences loved it, and it looked beautiful in the Playhouse at the Opera House. And so it's interesting how it's gone on into folklore as being this disaster. And I've worked on disasters. This wasn't a disaster.
What are you learning in that first gig as general manager?
I also ran the actors agency that he had. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like in my memory, that was the bulk of my day.
Was that Australian Creative Management?
Yeah. And there was a lot of people up on the wall that weren't even there anymore, they'd gone on to other representation, and I'd call them and say, come in, have a chat, let's talk about your career. And I'm not with them anymore, I'm with so-and-so.
6 months ago.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that to sift through, and then just a lot of dead wood that were never had worked, were never going to work. So a lot of it was just sifting through all of that. But then a lot of the general management stuff was what you would expect for a theatre company of that size. It was all about house seats and group bookings and, technical calls going down. I mean, back before there was any kind of security really at the Opera House, I could drive my car onto the concourse and underneath the stairs, and there was a parking spot for me opposite stage door. Wow. Could you imagine doing that now? No. Then I'd have to go in and take actual literal hard tickets in. I was only 5 at the time.
Of course you were. So what follows Peter Williams? Is that Harry M?
No. Not too long. I went and worked for a couple of different charities, including the Cancer Council, where I looked after predominantly Australia's biggest tea and coffee morning, which hadn't really started yet. There was just this idea from the UK. So
Australia's big morning tea.
Yes, it was. But when it first started, it was Australia's biggest tea and coffee morning, right. and now it's Australia's biggest morning tea. And so the first year, it raised about 60,000, and in my time there, I got it to raise over 2 million. And really, that was just using kind of a group booking kind of mentality, with getting lots of people out there with community groups. To have these events to raise money. So I was there for quite a few years, and it was while I was there that, and I was still running a couple of people as managing them. From when Australian Creative Management fell over, I took a few people with me and said, no, don't worry about it, I'll look after you. And was still putting them up for auditions and using the fax machine at work and mobile phone and all that kind of stuff. And I got a phone call one day, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I answered the phone and said, Harry Miller's my name. I understand you're running an agency out of your briefcase on the back seat of your car. I think you better come and talk to me. So I did. And then I started working for Harry. Mr. Miller, as we used to say.
You called him Mr. Miller,
Oh,
did you?
always, Mr. Miller, yeah.
So there's the universe looking after you again. Harry's obviously heard of you somehow.
Yes.
You'd be mad to say no.
No, exactly. Mad to say no. I mean, and I couldn't believe it. It was the universe saying, yep, you've got to go back to this. And I had been trying to get out of the Cancer Council. But yes, it was great to get that opportunity to go back into show business. And what a great way to do it, working for Harry. My gosh, the stuff that happened while I was there.
Is there a book in you, Michelle?
There is. I don't know if the non-disclosure agreement expires. I'll have to find out. But yeah, no, a lot happened while I was there. I mean, a lot of people are still, definitely then, and especially now, I guess, confused about what Harry actually did. I went in there hoping he would still produce shows, and he talked about it, but it didn't. It never happened again, but I did believe it was going to. But he predominantly sold stories. He managed people and he sold stories. And a big part of what I did was the selling of the stories. And stories they were.
So selling stories to media?
Yeah.
Print and TV? And
yeah.
So you were starting to form a life as a publicist, I guess?
Yes, I mean, a lot of people thought he was a publicist, right. But that's really not what we were or what we did. We managed people, Mr. 25%, and you had a stable of clients, and it was your job to find them work, and it wasn't acting work, it was to represent different brands and products, and also to find events that could be capitalised on, literally combing the paper, looking for things that might be something that could be sold and turned into something. And then there was also people that just turned up and would have initial meetings with him, and then you'd be sent off with them to get their story, formalise the story, come back to him with what you think you could do with it, and then sell it.
A lot of great talent has started in the offices of Harry M. I mean,
Yeah.
Michael Castle.
Michael Castle was the work experience boy when I
you
was
were there,
there.
really?
Yeah. Yeah. Harry knew how to pick him because he could tell that Michael was going to go on to be huge. And you could. He was only 17, I think, maybe 18. And he just had this determination and presence and
Intuition.
yeah, and just like very focused, and he knew what he was going to do and who he was going to be. But yeah, that old saying, be nice to the intern because you never know.
Exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, Harry really took Michael under his wing. I mean, he ended up working for him, and yeah.
So when did you run away and join the circus, Michelle?
That would have been not long after I finished working for Harry. Checkbook journalism was really not my style in the end. There was a particular incident that happened that I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then I went for a job working for Ross Mollison when he had his marketing agency, and I got the job. I think I got the job because I knew that Anyone Can Whistle only had 9 performances on Broadway. So he was very into musicals, and I could say those things. So anyway, I got that job, and it was great. It was everything all at once. We were all in there 7 days a week, working all hours on many different things, and he would be flying between Melbourne and Sydney, and you never knew where he was. And you know, this was at a time where so much was happening in Sydney, and he was also working. I don't know whether he was running the marketing department for Fox Studios, which hadn't opened yet, or whether he was in it, or what his role was there. I'm really not sure, but that's where he was all day. And then he'd rock into the office at 6:30, and then we'd have meetings about what else we were doing. And so I thought it was fantastic. It was just so fast and not boring. And that's when I was in a meeting, and he said, so we're going to do this. And it was a drawing, and I've got it still. I don't know if anybody else does, but I've got it. It was a cartoon of a black tent with cat's eyes on it, with Ayers Rock in the background. And he said, this is what we're going to do. And I thought, that's just ridiculous. That's never going to happen. What a stupid thing to think. Because, you know, Ross had these big dreams, but it happened. We were all standing there with champagne in our hands in November.
So it premiered in Ayers Rock, did it?
Yeah, we did Alice Springs. We did Darwin and Alice Springs as like previews. And then, November 1999, we opened at Ayers Rock.
And then Grease followed, and then Shout.
And then Shout.
So you worked on that full-time, those shows?
Yeah.
As publicist?
Yeah. Well, about 5 months into the tent tour, and I never let anybody call it a tent when we did it. You had to call it a big top. There was a massive falling out between the Ross Mollison organisation and the Really Useful organisation, and that's when I was asked to go and work for the Really Useful organisation. And so again, like Ross is going, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and I went, okay, but no, I'm going to go and work for the company that does musicals because that's what I want to do. And so yes, that then went on for I think another year and a bit. And then we did Grease, and then we did Shout. And in the middle of all of that, the Really Useful company took a whole lot of Australians to China to do the music of Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it was the first time something had gone into China, and that was Joanne Robertson. That was huge. But they also decided to co-produce a play, which was The Graduate, which I did the publicity for. So that was The Graduate with Winter Hughes and Mark Priestley We opened 3 weeks after September 11, which made it really difficult. The day we opened, the MLC Centre was on the front page of the Daily Telegraph saying that, you know, there were men of Middle Eastern persuasion in the stairwells and taking photographs, and that was it. I was like, we're done for, because if people are terrified to go to that building because the American consulate's in there, then we're not going to have an audience, and we didn't.
So it didn't sell the show?
No.
It had a phenomenal cast too.
It did.
John Waters was in it.
Yeah. Tracy Mann, Andrew McFarlane, yeah. It was great. And a very, very young Ben Lawson understudying Benjamin, and it's not in his CV,
Right.
so that's why I'm mentioning it.
With the big top shows, obviously the original intention was to visit those small rural towns, I imagine, that didn't have performing arts centres, perhaps. How do you go with something like as simple as ticketing? I mean, the show's coming to town. I remember growing up in a little country town, and the circus would come to town, and you'd get your tickets at the local newsagent or milk bar or something. Who's doing all of that? Are you doing that?
Well, yeah, I mean, me and Carmen Pavlovic, who was general manager, and we had different marketing people coming and going throughout that show. I feel like a lot of it was just me and Carmen in Avis rent-a-cars, travelling around, staying at Flag Inns because they were a sponsor. But yes, you'd go to a town, you'd have a look at whether you felt that they could deal with. They didn't have to deal with 8 shows or 7 shows, but if they could deal with 5, I mean, it was a 2,000-seat big top. And you look at, to see, there were things like if there were 4 $2 shops. Remember $2 shops?
Yep.
If there was 4 $2 shops in the main drag, then that's too many. That means people don't really have enough money. If you're there on a pension day and they're queuing up outside the ATMs, okay, that's probably not a good sign. And then the final thing was the cuts of meat at the butchers. Go and have a look at the butchers. And I got that from somebody I knew that worked in politics that said the best way to find out about a town's affordability was the cuts of meat. They're not going to cut the expensive meat if no one's buying it. So if there was lots of sausages and lots of minced meat, and then you're like, okay, what's near here? What else can we do? And most of the time we got it right. A few times we got it wrong. But it was then it was meeting with the Chamber of Commerce and meeting with the council and talking to the local news agency to see if they would take on a Ticketek machine. And then Ticketek would follow up and send somebody out. And I mean, we had our own box office, and the majority of the tickets would sell once the tent went up. But you always had to have people doing stuff in advance. So we'd go there to suss out the town. Then once the deal was done, we'd go back and put it on sale. And often that was just in a town hall with a video machine, and sometimes just me on my own getting up and talking about it, sticking the VHS in with the show reel, and then saying, so, we're taking tickets now. And I would literally sit there with a pad and a pen from Ticketek and take people's bookings and rip it off and put it there and do the next one. And then get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and get on a flight and fly to the next town and do the whole thing again.
Wow.
Sometimes with Tim, and we'd get to a town and Tim McFarlane would say, okay, I think that's a good restaurant. And I go, okay, great, we'll go there, book that. And then sometimes with Kerry, when we're doing Greece, Bernadette Hayes and I, and Mackay, and then a lot with Carmen.
Hi-ho, the glamorous life.
Yeah. Look, it was good. There were many moments that weren't glamorous. You learnt things like you turn up at the airport at 4 o'clock in the morning and you didn't put your rental car key in the drop box until you were sure that flight was there and it was going to take off. Because sometimes they'd say, the flight's delayed for 8 hours, and you couldn't go anywhere because you'd dropped the key. So you'd hang on to the key until you were boarding the plane.
There we go. As she opens her mineral water.
Yes, not champagne, sorry.
Cuts of meat and rent-a-car keys, the secrets of the travelling publicists.
Okay, I digress. You want to know about the small towns and how much they love the show, and I talk about cuts of meat.
No, I love it. So when do you go out and become your own woman as a publicist? You start your own company, which is called Michelle Guthrie...
MGM, it was called then, because I already had registered Michelle Guthrie Management when Peter Williams closed down, and I took on those 10 clients to keep them. And actually, Kevin Goldsby, do you remember Kevin Goldsby? He was part of the Naked Vicar show, and he was predominantly a voiceover person at that time. And, I knew him because I knew his daughter. And he turned up and said, I know what you should call yourself. You should call yourself MGM Management. And he even drew a little logo and everything. And I was like, wow, okay,
with
great.
With a searchlight or...?
No, it was just a square box. Right. And I was like, okay, great. So I already had that registered. So how that happened was I was working for Really Useful, and the shout wasn't working really well. And then Rodney Rigby came and said, so I want you to come and do shows for me at Jacobson's. And that's still fine. You can still work for Tim, but you're going to have to go out on your own. And he basically said, this is what you're going to do. And I went, okay. And it was terrifying. And I still worked out of what were the Ross Mollison offices at Double Bay that were just, in the same space. It's really useful. And then just worked for both for a while. And then I was really out on my own.
You've just listening to your conversation, Michael Castle, Harry M, Ross Mollison, Tim McFarlane, Carmen Pavlovic, Rodney
Rigby.
You're working
Kevin
with,
Jacobson.
You're working with these giants of impresarios in the country. Well, they've become or still are.
Mm. Yes, but I when you asked me thing about before not looking and being retrospective, I can't even speak anymore. It's the mineral water. I do know that part of the key to my success at that time was honesty. These were people that were surrounded by people not being honest with them, and. I could back it up. This will work because, that won't work because. I think the ticket prices can be this because. And I think that had a lot to do with it. I mean, yeah, I delivered, absolutely delivered. And that had a lot to do with it too. But you learn so much from those people. I mean, I don't know how that all go now, especially your Michael Edgeleys and Kevin Jacobsons and people like that, how they would actually survive currently. I think it's probably good they've retired. I mean, cowboys is not really the right word, but the rules are very different now to when they were around.
Yeah. Neglected musicals.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fabulous project, which must be about 10 years old now, is it?
11.
11.
Mm.
So obviously prompted by your enormous passion for musicals.
Mm-hmm.
How did it all start?
I was living in London and I walked past the Covent Garden Performing Arts Museum. Is that what it was called?
Yep, that's what it,
And they said, there was a sign saying £5 to come and watch Green Willow. And I thought, what the hell is Green Willow?
The Anthony Perkins musical.
Yeah. So I went in and it was just this small room, up a small stage about...
Never, Never Will I Marry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was the stage was a foot and a half up, and there was an upright piano, and there was people standing there holding like clipboard things, and they did the show. And I thought, we should do this at home. Why aren't we doing this? They're just doing it to do it. And so 20 years later, I was like, okay, now it's time. And I say this in my little speech at the one-day rehearsal for Neglected to the cast, that one of the reasons why I started it was I felt at that time there wasn't really a lot of joy in our industry. I feel there is now, and I do feel the haze has had a lot to do with that. But I felt that at that time there wasn't a lot of joy. And, people were doing replica musicals and being told where to stand and what to say and how to move. And so I thought, well, okay, this is good timing. We'll do it now. And the first one we did was No Way to Treat a Lady. And I'm not sure if people understand, the choices actually come from the director. The director chooses the show. I say yay or nay to that choice. But they have to feel the passion for it and see it all in their head because of the one-day rehearsal scenario. So we just did 2 shows and it went really well and everybody loved it. And that was back when that space was the Darlinghurst Theatre, and we do it on Monday when they didn't have a show.
And just with a piano?
Just with a piano. But back then, just with a keyboard, because the Darlinghurst didn't have a piano. Right. So it was always just a keyboard and off we go.
New York has the Encore series, but that's a much bigger spectacular, isn't it? And of course Melbourne had the production company.
Yeah, but the production company started a bit simpler. But then they like with everything. I mean, Neglected's gotten bigger than it was. Things grow. So they actually, I think in the end, 2 weeks rehearsals. I think they did in the end. I'm not sure. And it's such a shame that that's not happening down there anymore. I'm sure somebody will rush in and take its place at some point.
So you aim to do a couple a year?
Yes. There's been a few years where there's been 3. It's really just about what availability there is with the space. I could do more, but it'd be good to, now they're for a whole week. There's so many, like you mentioned before, off mic, 70s Girls 70, 70 Girls 70.
Yep.
And it'd be great to do that. I love that show. There's great music in that show. But But you couldn't do a whole week probably of that. You might need to do 3 or 4. And there's a lot of those.
And of course, little gems grow out of your neglected musicals. Calamity Jane went on, was it a national tour? It was certainly a tour of the
we call
East
it a national
Coast.
tour.
Yeah. Did you expect that could happen? That a full-blown production would go out of a concert?
More so in the beginning, right. But as it went on, and then of course, when we started the Haze, I thought, well, it's not going to happen now because there's the Haze and that's this, and they're short seasons, so 3 to 4 week seasons of the Haze will go off around the world. So I really had thought, okay, well, neglected musicals is what it is, and it won't do that. And then there was Calamity Jane.
Yeah. And the rest is history.
Yeah. We did. At first, we thought we'll only do a few and see how, but it sold out so quickly. I mean, Calamity Jane was one of those movies that was on all the time, so there was a certain...
Well, you talk about those Sunday matinees. Yeah, I think I must have seen it 12 times in my youth.
Yeah, Bill Collins introducing it, maybe a Friday night or a Saturday night as well. I mean, it was very popular. I mean, when we did The Neglected, you'd look around the audience and there was people mouthing along to Black Hills of Dakota. That's not even one of the most popular songs in the show. Yeah. And you go, oh my God, okay, this is going to be huge, this is going to be big. And then, of course, really, Richard Carroll, like, we've got to do it. And I'm like, are you sure? I don't know. I know they love it now, but will they love it then? He's like, nah, we've got to do it. So we did.
Could we possibly then see Well-Behaved Women again?
Yes, we definitely will be
Fantastic.
seeing Well-Behaved Women again.
Oh, it deserves to be seen again and again by a much bigger audience.
Yes, there is interest. Nothing I can talk about at the moment, right. But really serious interest, which is great, and working on all that right now. So I'm hoping that soon we'll be able to say. But yes, definitely coming back.
So what's happening this year with neglected musicals?
Well, in a couple of weeks we have Nice Work If You Can Get It, which is a Gershwin musical, more or less based on a lot of those Gershwin musicals from the early 30s, whose scripts you really can't get away with now. Things like OK, and I think Let Them Eat Cake. I think some of the songs are from that. And, we thought something bright. This Cameron Mitchell was picking, he's directing and choreographing, so he picked the show. And it's got such a good score, obviously, but just a really good fun plot line. The women are leading the stories in it. So that just seemed the perfect one to do. It's I think there's some tickets left.
Right. It's at the Haze, of course. So,
yes.
So listeners can jump online and or call the Haze and secure a ticket, hopefully, for that. And you're going back to Belvoir, I believe.
Well, yes. I mean, we had kind of on the day that COVID shut everything down, we had announced that we were doing Curtains, the 2007 musical, at Belvoir in the neglected format. And so I don't really know whether people knew that was going to happen because I didn't send a newsletter out. I was like, this is all going to really go down. And so it did. So it didn't happen. But it will be happening as part of the Festival of Everything at Belvoir in September.
Are we allowed to know any more about it? Like who's directing or cast?
Yes, Richard Carroll's directing.
Right.
That's it.
That's it that you can
well, there
divulge at the moment.
Well, the thing with Neglected, there's no point locking too many people in early on because, obviously if other work opportunities come up, they're going to take them because it's, much longer period of time of work that they could be offered. This is only going to be, I think we're going to do 3 or 4 shows at Belvoir because it's a bigger space.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's on sale to the general public now. It was just subscription only, but now...
Do you audition your actors, or is that all... No, it's all the invitation?
Yeah, I don't feel with this format that it's right to audition.
Yeah.
it's a really good opportunity to use actors in roles that you would never normally see them in. One of my favourite things early on was seeing the late, great Michael Falzon as a villain in On the 20th Century. And I just thought, this is what you've got to do now. All these gorgeous leading men that you do, you have to be the villain. You have to be the character actor. You're so good at this. And after 21 neglected musicals, you don't remember every single little bit. But he really stands out in my memory of doing such an amazing performance in that show.
Yeah, he's a lovely actor and a beautiful singer and such a gorgeous man that's gone too soon.
Much too soon.
Yeah. So thanks, Michelle. That was good. Was that painless?
No.
No, really?
Well, no, because now I'm going to sit here and worry about all the things that I said that I shouldn't say. And we haven't really talked about the haze.
Did you? Oh,
I'll be drawn and quartered.
You must talk about the haze then. As she sips on her soda.
The Haze, yes. I'm one of the founding members of the Haze.
Yes.
I'm on the board of the Haze.
See, I feel like I've spoken about the Haze because I've talked to Richard Carroll on the podcast and Neil Gooding, but let's hear your story.
Well, I just want to talk about how fabulous it is and how proud we all are.
Yeah, as you should be.
And how much hard work it was and is still. And what a fabulous job everybody's doing that's working on it, in it, around it. We have a wonderful leader in our chair, Lisa Campbell, fantastic general manager, Will Harvey, and, the things we have planned for what the Haze is going to do going forward. As you know, we do a lot of new Australian work, and we develop a lot of this new work. And one of the shows that we've been developing for the past 4 years is a show called Dubbo Championship Wrestling. And I'm the EP on that show, and it's very close to my heart. It's just going to be the best thing ever.
And Sheridan Harbridge is directing it.
Sheridan Harbridge is directing it, and Joe Akari as musical supervisor, Glenn Morehouse as musical director, casting it at the moment. It is so funny and so outrageous and so amazing, and I'm not overselling it. Everybody has to come and see the show because it really is going to be special.
So where did you find a work like that?
Well, we did have a program called New Musicals Australia, which is now Hayes Development Program, and people submit, and myself and Neil Gooding would go through it all and select which ones should then go through the different stages in order to be 20 minutes was presented. This particular one, these two brothers had written a couple of songs, and I think there was like Act 1, but maybe not quite. And they brought it to another thing we were doing called First Look, which was it wasn't formal. It was not supposed to go anywhere. It was to give you encouragement to keep writing. And so they brought it in for that. And I was like, guys, you've really got to finish this, and you've got to submit it to NMA, and this really could be something, and it's going to be something.
So what month?
November, not on sale yet, but it will be November.
Yeah, well, we'll look out for that. Dubbo Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's been lovely wrestling with you for this last hour, Michelle. Thank you. It's been lovely having you on the show.
You.
We've been talking about it for a while, so we've made it happen.
Yes.
All right. All the best.
Thank you.
You can discover more of Neglected Musicals at www.neglectedmusicals.com.au. In 2021, you can catch their upcoming performances of Nice Work If You Can Get It at the Hayes Theatre and Candor and Ebb's Curtains at Belvoir Street. Let's hope too we can see a revival of the splendid Well-Behaved Women by Carmel Dean and presented by my guest today, Michelle Guthrie. Thanks, Michelle. You've been listening to Stages with Peter Ayres, produced and engineered by me. Please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. And remember to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Whooshkaa, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcast listening. Thanks for joining us in this episode. I'll catch you next time.